Sheikh Ramiz Al-Dahlan and Liana Farin appeared to have everything: power, beauty, and a perfect marriage that captivated Dubai's elite. But behind the marble walls of their seaside palace, a secret filmed on a forgotten phone would shatter their fairy tale forever, leading to betrayal, blackmail, and a horrifying fall that no one could explain. When Sheikh Ramiz Al-Dahlan married Liana Farin, it was described by every Dubai magazine as the wedding of the decade. Gold-plated invitations, diamond-encrusted decor, and a 7-day celebration that stretched from the dunes of the Arabian desert to a private island off the coast of Palm Jumeirah. The guest list included royalty, politicians, and global celebrities. The media called it a match made in heaven, the union of Dubai's most powerful sheikh and a graceful woman from London who carried herself with quiet charm and elegance. Liana Farin had grown up in the polished suburbs of Surrey, far removed from the extravagant world she was marrying into. Her father, a retired diplomat, had raised her to be kind but cautious, and her life had been calm and predictable until she met Sheikh Ramiz during a charity gala in London. He was handsome, charismatic, and surrounded by an aura of mystery that made people both drawn to and intimidated by him. Within 6 months, he proposed in a private jet above the clouds. It felt like a dream she never wanted to wake up from. When Liana arrived in Dubai after the wedding, her new home was beyond anything she had ever imagined. A marble palace by the sea with 30 rooms, fountains that danced to music, and corridors lit by chandeliers imported from Paris. Every corner whispered of wealth. Yet beneath that perfection, there was something that made her uneasy. She couldn't explain it. It was a feeling, faint, like the chill that passes when someone walks behind you unnoticed. The household staff treated her with formal respect, addressing her as Madame Liana, but they avoided eye contact. The air inside the mansion carried silence, a kind that felt deliberate. There was one maid who stood out from the rest, a young Filipina named Mara Silas. She was quiet and efficient, always appearing at the right moment and disappearing just as quickly. Liana found her polite but distant, as if she was hiding something she dared not reveal. That in the early days, Ramiz was attentive, showering Liana with expensive gifts, jewelry, designer clothes, even a baby blue Maserati she never learned to drive. But as days turned into weeks, his attention began to fade. He was often gone for business trips that no one could confirm. When she asked where he was, the staff would reply that the sheikh's schedule was private. Even Khalid Noor, his personal assistant, seemed cautious when speaking of his employer, as if there were invisible boundaries that could not be crossed. Liana tried to adjust. She filled her time by redecorating parts of the palace and attending charity events in the city. Yet, every evening when she returned, she noticed small things that didn't fit. Perfume scents that weren't hers lingering in the bedroom. A set of earrings on the dressing table she had never seen before. A glass of wine left half-finished on the balcony though she never drank. Her instincts began to whisper warnings she tried to ignore. She told herself it was her imagination, the result of loneliness in a foreign world. But one evening, as she walked through the quiet corridor of the West Wing, she noticed a faint reflection in one of the mirrors, a woman, not her, slipping into Ramiz's private office. By the time she turned around, the hallway was empty. The next morning, when she mentioned it to Khalid, his expression stiffened. He simply told her that some areas of the palace were restricted for security reasons. That was the moment she realized something was being hidden from her, something that everyone else seemed to know. Despite her growing suspicion, she clung to the idea that her husband loved her. The world saw their marriage as perfect, and she couldn't bear to be the one to expose the cracks. But deep inside, she felt a cold distance building between them. Ramiz's eyes no longer carried warmth when they met hers. As she stood on the palace balcony one evening, looking out over the shimmering lights of Dubai, she wondered whether she had truly married a man or a mystery. Behind the luxury, the jewels, and the promises, she could sense a shadow growing, a truth waiting to surface, one that would soon turn her dream life into a nightmare beyond imagination. Liana's days in the palace slowly began to blur together, a rhythm of luxury that felt more like isolation than privilege. The house was always spotless, the gardens always manicured, the air always scented with jasmine, yet there was no warmth. She wandered through halls lined with portraits of the Al-Dahlan ancestors, all staring down as if guarding their legacy. It was a palace of silence, broken only by the faint sound of footsteps that always seemed to stop when she turned around. She had begun to notice strange things, drawers left slightly open, missing items from her dressing room, and messages that disappeared from her phone. Once, she returned to her suite to find the curtains drawn shut, though she always left them open for the view of the sea. The unease grew when she overheard two maids whispering in the hallway about something Madame shouldn't see. The moment they noticed her, they froze and bowed their heads, pretending to be dusting. That Liana's curiosity soon turned into quiet fear. Her husband's behavior had changed completely. Ramiz came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual brand. His clothes were sometimes wrinkled, and his phone was always locked. He had once shared everything with her during their engagement, his travel plans, his meetings, even his thoughts. But now, he barely looked at her. His moods shifted unpredictably. Some nights he was distant and cold, other times overly affectionate, as if trying to erase suspicion. One afternoon, while arranging books in the grand library, Liana's hand brushed against a locked drawer in the mahogany cabinet. It was small, carved with Arabic initials, and out of place among the neatly organized shelves. She tugged at it, and to her surprise, it opened slightly. Inside was a phone, old, cracked, and covered with dust. The device looked abandoned, yet something about it pulled her attention. When she pressed the power button, the screen flickered weakly before lighting up. The phone contained dozens of video files. The names of the files were strange, numbers, dates, and letters that made no sense. She clicked one at random. The screen filled with grainy footage, showing a bedroom she recognized instantly, the master suite. The image shifted, and her heart stopped. Sheikh Ramiz appeared on the screen, sitting at the edge of the bed, smiling at someone behind the camera. The camera tilted, and a woman's voice giggled softly before stepping into view. It was Mara Sealis, the quiet maid who always avoided her gaze. Liana froze, unable to move. Her mind screamed, but her body stayed still. She opened another video, then another. The scenes were intimate, recorded in secret, each one confirming a betrayal too deep to comprehend. The man she had trusted, the man she had loved, was living a double life right under her roof. She dropped the phone on the floor, trembling. The sound of glass cracking echoed through the silent library. For a long time, she just stood there, staring at the broken screen, her breath shallow. When she finally picked it up, her hands shook so violently that she could barely unlock it again. The videos continued to play like ghosts haunting the air around her. For the rest of the day, she couldn't think. Every sound in the palace made her jump. Every reflection in the mirrors looked like someone watching her. She avoided Mara, who went about her chores quietly, never once meeting her eyes. But now, every movement Mara made felt suspicious. Was she part of something deeper? Was Ramiz hiding more than just an affair? When Ramiz returned that evening, Liana pretended to be asleep. She could hear him walk into the room, pause near the dresser, and take something from the drawer. She wanted to open her eyes, to confront him, but fear pinned her to the bed. When he finally left, she opened her eyes and stared into the darkness, her mind unraveling. The woman who had arrived in Dubai full of dreams was gone. What remained was someone trapped inside a gilded cage, surrounded by secrets and deceit. That night, as she sat alone by the window, watching the moonlight spill over the silent courtyard, she realized that her perfect marriage was an illusion, one that had just begun to collapse. The night after discovering the videos, Liana felt as though time had stopped. The palace that once shimmered with beauty now seemed to suffocate her. Every marble wall, every flickering chandelier, every echoing footstep reminded her of the life she thought she had and the lie it had become. The air felt heavy, carrying a silence that pressed against her chest. Sleep wouldn't come. Her eyes stayed fixed on the balcony doors as she replayed the images from the phone again and again inside her mind, each moment cutting deeper than the last by sunrise. Her reflection in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. Her face looked pale, her eyes swollen, her hair disheveled. The woman staring back at her no longer looked like a newlywed bride. She looked like someone broken. She moved through the morning in silence, avoiding the servants, keeping her thoughts to herself. When she passed Mara in the hallway, Their eyes met for the first time since she had seen the footage. Mara quickly looked away and disappeared into the laundry room. That small act confirmed everything Liana feared. Mara knew. Liana went back to the library, locked the doors, and sat on the floor with the phone still clutched in her hand. She scrolled through the files again, noticing that the dates stretched back to months before the wedding. Some videos were taken in the same bedroom where she now slept, long before she had ever set foot in the palace. Others were in different rooms, filmed from hidden angles, as if someone had carefully planned everything. The betrayal wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a history of deception. She thought about her family back in London, how proud they were, how her mother had called the marriage a blessing, how her friends had envied her. She imagined their faces when they'd hear what she had discovered. The thought filled her with shame. She had married into a nightmare. As the evening fell, the golden light from the sunset poured through the balcony glass, painting her room in hues of red and orange. She sat at her dressing table and began to write on a piece of cream-colored stationery embossed with the Al-Dahlan family crest. Her handwriting trembled as she wrote about how everything had gone wrong, how the man she loved had turned into a stranger. She wrote of the lies, the humiliation, and how she felt trapped in a world that didn't belong to her. But midway through the letter, her thoughts became tangled. Her pen stopped moving. The last words she managed to write were, "He said he would never let me leave." The ink smudged as her tears fell onto the paper. She folded it and placed it inside the top drawer of the dresser, beside her wedding ring, which she slipped off her finger for the first time. Outside, the wind grew stronger, rattling the curtains and making the balcony doors creak. Liana stood, her bare feet moving slowly across the marble floor. She stepped onto the balcony and looked down at the shimmering courtyard far below. The city lights twinkled in the distance, beautiful and distant, just like the life she had dreamed of. Her mind spun with images: Remy's cold smile, Mara's eyes avoiding hers, the laughter from the videos echoing in her ears. Moments later, one of the guards stationed outside the palace heard a sharp scream. It cut through the quiet air and ended abruptly. When they rushed into the courtyard, they found Liana's body lying motionless on the tiles, the white silk of her gown spread around her like a fallen veil. The lights from the palace reflected off the marble floor, bathing the scene in eerie gold. The phone with the videos was found smashed near her bed, the screen shattered, but the data still recoverable. No one knew if she had dropped it or destroyed it in anger before stepping onto the balcony. The palace went into lockdown. The servants were ordered not to speak. Mara Silas fainted when she saw what had happened, while Khalid Noor made a phone call that no one overheard. By midnight, the entire estate was silent again. But in that silence, something irreversible had happened. The bride who came to Dubai for love was gone, and in her place remained a mystery, a death too sudden, too convenient, and too perfect to be what it seemed. The morning after Liana's death, the Al-Dahlan palace was sealed off by Dubai police. Yellow tape wrapped around its ivory gates, and uniformed officers guarded every entrance. The news broke within hours, spreading across the city like wildfire. The newlywed wife of Sheikh Ramiz Al-Dahlan had fallen to her death from the balcony of the royal suite. To the public, it was shocking but vague. To the few who knew the truth, it was something far darker. Inspector Yasser Al-Mansour arrived at the scene just after sunrise. He had handled hundreds of cases, but the moment he stepped into the palace, he sensed this one was not simple. The marble floors were polished, the scent of jasmine still lingered in the air, but beneath that perfection lay tension so thick it could be felt in every breath. The sheikh was calm, too calm. He greeted the authorities with a blank expression, claiming his wife had been unstable for weeks. He said she was lonely, unable to adjust to life in Dubai, and often locked herself in her room. It was an explanation that sounded rehearsed. In Liana's bedroom, the evidence told a different story. The balcony doors were open, and the curtains fluttered in the sea breeze. On the floor, near the dresser, lay shards of glass from a phone screen, small splatters of blood, and a half-finished handwritten note. The words were heartbreaking, the last sentence stopping midline. There was no clear mention of suicide, no goodbye. Instead, there was confusion, fear, and the sense that someone had interrupted her final thoughts. Forensics quickly noticed that 2 sets of fingerprints covered the balcony railing. One matched Liana, but the other belonged to someone else. The prints were faint, yet distinctive. When tested, they matched Mara Silas, the Filipina maid. That discovery changed everything. Mara was brought in for questioning, trembling and pale. Her voice shook as she denied being on the balcony, saying she was cleaning the West Wing that morning. But her alibi was weak. The other maids gave inconsistent statements. Inspector Yasser ordered the team to check the palace's surveillance footage. Oddly, several cameras in the corridor leading to the royal suite had gone offline the night before the incident. The system had been manually disabled. Only one camera from a distance caught a faint silhouette on the balcony. Two figures, one clearly smaller, one wearing light-colored clothing. It was blurry, but enough to prove Liana wasn't alone. Meanwhile, the smashed phone recovered from her room was sent for digital recovery. When the data finally loaded, investigators found the hidden videos, dozens of them, the same ones that had destroyed Liana's peace. The footage revealed Sheikh Ramiz and Mara in compromising situations, recorded over months, long before the marriage. Inspector Yasser knew instantly that this was no suicide. It was a chain of manipulation, power, and fear. When confronted with the evidence, Ramiz maintained his composure. He claimed the videos were private recordings made with consent, and that Liana's emotional instability had led her to act irrationally after discovering them. But his explanation didn't match the tone of the messages exchanged between him and his assistant, Khalid Noor. The recovered text logs contained one crucial line from Ramiz: "Make sure everything is gone before she finds it." That message had been sent less than 12 hours before Liana's death. Days later, Khalid Noor disappeared. His car was found abandoned near the Dubai marina, his passport missing, his phone switched off. Rumors spread that he had taken a private jet out of the country the same night the body was discovered. The investigation deepened, but every lead seemed to dissolve into silence. As the inquiry continued, the palace grew emptier. The servants were dismissed one by one, and Mara was placed under house arrest. Behind closed doors, whispers circulated that she was being silenced, paid to take the blame. Inspector Yasser struggled to find the truth, but powerful influence surrounded the Sheikh like an invisible shield. Witnesses changed their stories, files disappeared, and evidence went missing from the police archive. The city that had once admired the Al-Dahlan name now murmured behind closed doors. Some believed Liana had jumped in despair. Others believed she was pushed. But Yasser knew that nothing about that balcony, or that night, was accidental. There were too many questions and too many lies, and somewhere behind the wealth and the gold gates, someone was hiding a truth worth killing for. Weeks turned into months, and the investigation into Liana Farin's death refused to fade away. The media had moved on to newer scandals, but whispers about the Sheikh's wife who fell from the balcony continued to circle quietly among Dubai's elite. The palace, once alive with opulence, now stood eerily silent, its gates closed to visitors. The golden lights that once glowed each night were dimmed, and the fountain in the courtyard no longer danced. It was as if the place itself had fallen into mourning or guilt. Inspector Yasser Al-Mansour was still not satisfied with the official report that labeled the case as a probable suicide. He revisited the evidence late into the night, going over photographs, forensics, and digital data. Something didn't fit. The angle of Liana's fall, the direction of her body, and the placement of the phone suggested she had not simply jumped. The position of her hands and the bruises on her wrists pointed toward a struggle. But no one in power wanted to hear that. One evening, as Yasser reviewed security footage once again, his assistant handed him a hard drive that had been recovered from a private server belonging to Khalid Noor. The files were encrypted, but after hours of decoding, a folder opened. Inside were time-stamped video feeds, apparently backups from the palace's surveillance system. Among them was footage from the night of the incident, something the Sheikh staff had claimed was missing. The clip was grainy, but it showed two figures standing on the balcony. One was clearly Liana, wearing a long nightgown that flowed in the wind. The second figure was shorter, dressed in the maid's uniform. But the face, once enhanced, revealed something unexpected. It wasn't Mara Silas. It was another woman. Entirely, someone resembling Mara, but with subtle differences. Records later confirmed that a new maid had been hired through an agency just a week before the wedding, under false identification. Her name was never verified, and she had vanished the same day Liana died. When Yasser brought this finding to his superiors, the case took a darker turn. The mysterious maid's employment was traced back to a private staffing agency owned by one of Remy's shell companies. It became clear that someone had arranged for her presence. She was never on the official payroll, never registered in the household documents. Whoever she was, she had been placed there deliberately. Meanwhile, Mara Silas was found dead in a small apartment in Dara just days after her release from questioning. The cause of death was ruled an overdose, but Yasser's team discovered evidence of bruising on her arms and signs of forced entry. The apartment had been ransacked, and her phone was missing. It was obvious that someone wanted her silenced permanently. With Mara gone and Khalid missing, the circle of witnesses had all but vanished. The Sheikh, facing growing suspicion, left Dubai under the pretense of medical treatment and relocated to his private estate in Morocco. Interpol was contacted after a warrant was quietly issued, but by the time authorities arrived, he had already disappeared again. Some said he was living under a different name in a Mediterranean villa. Others claimed he had paid his way into protection somewhere beyond the reach of law. Despite pressure to close the file, Yasser continued his work unofficially. One night, while revisiting the recovered phone data from Liana's device, his team found an auto-synced cloud backup that had gone unnoticed. In that backup were copies of the videos, and at the end of one file, something chilling appeared. The same mysterious maid recording the Sheikh without his knowledge, whispering softly in Tagalog. When translated, her words were haunting. "She will find out tonight." That sentence changed everything. It proved that Liana's death had been orchestrated. Whether she was pushed or manipulated into jumping remained unclear, but it was no longer an accident. Someone had set her up to discover the betrayal at the worst possible moment, knowing it would destroy her. The videos, the secret maid, the missing assistant, all pieces of a carefully constructed trap. The final report never reached the public. The palace remained sealed, and the Al-Dahlan family ensured the story was buried under influence and wealth. Yet, within the quiet corridors of Dubai's law enforcement, the case became a warning, a reminder that beneath luxury and perfection can hide unimaginable darkness. Years later, people still whispered about the balcony, how the shadows on certain nights looked like a woman standing at the edge, her gown swaying in the wind. Some said it was Liana's spirit, still waiting for justice that power had stolen from her. Others said it was guilt, frozen forever in marble and gold. But one truth remained unshaken. Behind the facade of glamour, her fall was not from weakness, but from betrayal so deep that even death couldn't silence it.